Easy Out update, April 2015.
Alright, hey. Okay, so we made a quick update, change to our new top. So we made this top a lot longer. So that allowed for a ball to be in there and also the catheter. So that when we push the ball out, there'll be enough room for the ball to move around. So we did have to do a bit of drilling, but I think we worked it out. So the ball will go inside there. And as you can see, it's pretty far in, which is nice. And so for now, we're using a makeshift coffee straw, very high tech. And we also did a little bit of drilling on the backside too, but basically now we'll be able to push the ball, as you can see, and then we can use it to start draining. So,
yeah, so the ball can hold the liquid in, and then we can move the ball to drain it.
Yep, so let's go, we'll give it a try.
So we are setting up our experiment again. We have the agarose gel bottom ready, and we inserted the catheter, and we filled up the balloon.
So it has a tight seal on the bladder.
Yeah, and now we're going to get ready to fill up the balloon and then clamp, cut, and add the cap.
Alright, let's do it. Alright, so right now we're attaching the clamp to the catheter.
Alright, so we are cutting the
Give it to me, I'm worth it. Baby, I'm worth it. I'm worth it. Give me, I'm worth it. Give it to
We've already inflated the balloon inside the catheter model, and we've clamped it with these nifty clamps we now have. And we're going to cut it and use Play-Doh to try and
plug the balloon cord.
And then we'll cap it and see if we can keep the balloon inside inflated before we run our tests.
Alrighty.
So we filled the balloon port with Play-Doh, which would be replaced with some sort of polymer in the real world, and also a wire, which you could either print something that fit perfectly in there with that extra like sort of softer material around it to keep it really tight, or you could use a wire, I guess. And so the next thing we're gonna do is glue the cap on so that it's really secure. So we'll have 3 levels of protection. We'll have the clamp, the cap, and then we'll also have a ball inside and with a magnetic cap on top. So hopefully all 3 of those will be able to not only keep the urine from coming out when you don't want it to, but also keep this balloon port really tight and secure.
And as you can see here, without the clamp on, the balloon port the balloon is still inflated, which is good for our model. Alright, so we just filled up our balloon bladder model to 400 mils. Now we're gonna do the drainage to see how much is actually being drained out with the catheter top.
Right now it's clamped shut with the clamp, and then we'll unclamp it and see how it'll drain and how much will drain into the beaker.
Alright, so let's do it. Alright, so this is an example of one of the test runs we're doing. So we're basically just gonna start the water, it's gonna flow in. Well, it's also, the clamp is on, so it shouldn't be leaking. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and fill it, and then we'll run our drainage test. Okay, pull it tight, pull it tight.
Stop.
Alright, so this is what the result of 20 seconds of filling. There is a bit of leakage from that area, but that's just
when it's taut, it doesn't leak.
Yeah, that's only because it's not tight, but in a patient it will be obviously tighter.
Because it'll be clamped against the skin.
Now we're gonna go ahead and drain it. You're gonna hold this tight.
Yeah, in a normal patient, the skin interface would have a clamp as well, so that you wouldn't have any like issues with it not being taut with the bladder.
Yep. So as you can see,
Some great filling.
it's draining properly. Alright, so we'll show you the result at the end. Alrighty, so we finished draining our bladder, and right now we're at about 550 milliliters, which is nice. So now we're going to verify our calculation to see how much we actually poured in there, and it should be closer to 600, which it is.
570, 560.
Yeah, it's like 580 actually. So probably there's some error in just like transportation or a little bit here and there.
Clearly drains better when there's more.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll show you our results after the conclusion of our testing. All right, so now we're going to be doing a failure test just to see how much kind of the bladder model can take before some very bad destruction of the bladder happens. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started and just see how many seconds it takes or how much will be filled in there. Okay.
Some things leak. Okay.
Let's go.
Body. So at 50 seconds, can we take it off and measure how much
It's
is
a
in
pretty
it?
big bladder. So now we're going to measure how much is actually in
And
there.
there's only a slight leakage.
As you can see, like there's still no leakage anywhere from
yeah,
the catheter
no leakage
top.
at all.
Which is nice. Okay, so now we're gonna figure out how much actually in there. All right.
Okay, so here is our results from the testing. We videoed just one of the tests that we did, but here we have all the different capacities that we tried out. So we have 200, 340 milliliters, 480, and then 600. And so we repeated all of these 3 times, and then we averaged what the remaining liquid was for each of them. And so
After it drained.
Oh yeah, after it was all after the balloon was drained, we saw how much liquid was left in the balloon, and this is how much was left. And so as you can see, it was averaged around like 50 to 70 milliliters that was left in the balloon. And as the balloon was filled with more water, it was a better drainage, and so less liquid was left at the end. So these are our average remaining liquids. And then after we did each of the different capacities, we tried to see what the failure rate was. So we added water into the balloon until at certain times to represent certain volumes. And so we did it twice, and we did it up to around 1.2 liters and 1.3 liters. And both of the times there's no leakage in the balloon catheter interface, and there's no leakage with the clamp on it, so there's no leakage out of the cap either. Also, these capacities were chosen to represent the different types of the capacities in the bladder. So the bladder is normally around 400 to 600 milliliters. So as you can see, we did like the highest capacity for a normal bladder, which is 600. Then we also tried to see how much would drain with less in the bladder, so around 200 and 340, and it still drained pretty well, even with a smaller volume. So it still left around like 50 and less than 100 milliliters. And the average, should I do the average time it took to drain? Yeah, so the average time it took to drain the bladder was around 4 to 5 minutes, so it was still around a normal time to go to the bathroom and excrete.
Hey guys, so I'm going to talk about some of the things that we did last week and some of the problems we had and how we kind of overcame them. So first off, we tried using, or with the new design cath top, we tried using the ball and actually a magnet to keep the ball kind of like in place. However, during our test runs, it did leak a bit. It's definitely a lot better than without the ball, but still had some leakage. So we tried to figure out some solutions to that. So we decided to actually add a clamp to our design. So now the clamp, it does a great job in keeping the urine from coming out or any liquid from coming out. However, we will be redesigning this, at least to try to make a CAD model to make it a lot lower profile. As you can see, this is a bit bulky, but if it is closer to the cath top, it should not stick out of the patient that much, which is pretty okay. So another problem we actually ran into was that when we cut the catheter and put the cath top on top, or cath top here, the balloon actually inside the bladder deflated. And so a potential reason for that, so right now you can see it's actually inflated, which is nice, it's still with this on. And so one of the reasons for that was because the ball actually didn't kind of like, it didn't allow, it allowed the liquid from the balloon to seep out. And so the way that we overcame that was actually by using a combination of Play-Doh and a wire. So we'll work on this and maybe try to make it a bit more, I guess, better and easier to use, but it worked very well. Essentially, we plugged that tiny tube with Play-Doh and the wire, and it kept the liquid in the balloon there, which is really good. So then finally, well, one of the problems also that we'll work on, I guess we'll talk about later is, or we'll work on later, is actually keeping, or for this top to make it a bit more different, because the printer did not have enough resolution size to really print out the key aspects of it, because we did design a novel like drainage tube to actually drain out the liquid. So we'll be working on maybe something like that for the future.
After a lot of design, testing, and fixing up our prototype, we have something that's pretty much what we wanted to achieve at the end of the year. So we have a cap that's able to securely keep in the urine when the person's not trying to drain their bladder. We have developed a couple innovative features, including the ball and cap design, as well as a rubber cap that will go on top, potentially with a magnet, to increase the security of the bladder. Oh, here's the cap right here. And we want to incorporate a magnet inside there, so that way it'll be able to keep the ball tight against the cap when the bladder is trying to be secured. We also added a clamp to increase the strength of both the seal for the urine and the balloon port, so that this bladder balloon stays inflated. And another innovative thing we did was we plugged the balloon port with, right now we're using Play-Doh and a wire, but easily some sort of maybe stiffer polymer material could be printed to the exact size that could be easily inserted, or maybe a thicker wire that would be able to exactly fit in there without that Play-Doh component. So with all these features, we've developed a low-profile catheter that's able to securely hold in urine, and we've tested it with several different tests that Sherilyn mentioned, so it can drain efficiently and quickly so that the person can effectively drain their bladder. But for future directions, the areas that we're going to look into in the next week or so, especially maybe even after we finish, with our final presentation, is designing maybe a cap that could even be even smaller. So right now, potentially the skin could be as close as this to the catheter, so you'd only have this much sticking out. But if we design maybe a flatter, smaller cap, or maybe even like a stronger one that would be able to really securely and low profile, hopefully, keep the catheter cap close to the skin, that would be an even better improvement on our design. And next Tuesday, we're going to the meat lab to get a pig bladder to test it on. Talk to Chuck over there, so that'll be another way to make sure our design works. And we're also planning on testing it with another set of balloons. So those two sets of tests, and maybe in one more CAD design, and we should be good to go. And yeah, so very close to the end.